So we're here this morning. This is our monthly member webinar. We've been calling it Coffee and Chat.
We'll take it. Coffee and Zach this time.
Yeah. Well, I don't have coffee either. Water.
Love it.
But the purpose is to just be able to share with our members a little bit more of our intimate world and the conversations we get to have on a daily basis. And I know everyone's really excited to have you here today.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be with this community. You guys have been at the forefront for a good long time here.
Thanks, Zach. So you want to introduce yourself? Who are you and what are you passionate about?
Thanks for the new branding there with the asterisks. That's funny. You guys are tracking it better than I am. Very good. I think everybody probably knows me a bit, but background as a medical doc. I did very much allopathic Western medicine training, University of Colorado, and then ultimately University of Virginia for all my 10 years of postdoctoral work there. I got subspecialties in internal medicine and endocrinology and metabolism, and did cancer research there at the University of Virginia. Before that, I was involved with mental health research, looking at neuroplasticity and the effects of the endocrine system. So looking at the ways in which stress and hormonal response to environment would change the shape and function of the brain. So that was also fascinating and kind of pertinent area of research back in the late 1990s and 2000s when I was doing that. And now you fast forward, what's amazingly been 20 years is that we now know that the microbiome, which is the last kind of 8 years of my life, how the microbiome is shaping the brain. And so I feel like in some ways my career has kind of come full circle. The cancer research definitely got me interested in the molecules we had found in the soil when we produced what was Restore initially, and recently went through the big shift in branding to this Intelligence of Nature brand. And so the products that we created there were from soil biochemistry. It was these little molecules made by bacteria and fungi. That became kind of this breakthrough in our world of science, starting to understand that human cells coordinate repair and communication between one another, not through human means, but through the means of the bacteria and fungi providing an ecosystem and wireless communication network between human cells. So it's been a very interesting and species humbling journey to realize that our species is so dependent on the microbiome that is ultimately an extension of the soils around us. So in a long roundabout way, I went from designing drugs to really focused on soil science and focused with our nonprofit that many of you are familiar with, that's working with Kiss the Ground to retrain farmers across the world to use a regenerative technique to recover the microbial density and vitality of their soils to improve everything from the nutrient density of their food all the way to improving global warming and CO2 reabsorption from the atmosphere and nutrient cycling, the carbon cycles, as well as the water cycles. So that's a little bit of ping pong back and forth through my career.
It's a good resume.
Mm-hmm.
I often find that someone who's new to soil science, that talking about the gut microbiome is an entry in. And I wonder, what I'm hoping is that the popularity that's come up around the gut microbiome will also start to emerge around soils. Because I think we're starting to understand that our guts are alive and full of all these microbes and things that we don't fully understand, but that create our health. And you want to speak to that?
I think it is exciting. It's not something I really saw coming for, I think, with 2020 vision, but in hindsight, it made a lot of sense that as soon as we started to get prepared to launch this documentary series in our nonprofit with Farmers Footprint, people from all over the world were calling us. Like, we literally hadn't even launched the org, and it was, individuals from media to farmers to large orgs, including yourselves, that have been doing this for years. Rodale, who's been in it for 60 years, everybody was calling us saying, you have the missing piece that we've been having, which is we need to tie the story of soil to every consumer. And it's very hard for a typical consumer who's not gardened in 2 generations to really sink their teeth into the importance of soil health. But exactly like you said, by turning it into a human health story, it's suddenly made it accessible to the entire population. And I think it's going to really improve the fundraising capacity of the Rodales of the world, the Kiss the Grounds of the world, and everything else, so that our efforts can be scaled appropriately.
Oh, I think your microphone cut out. I don't hear you anymore.
I apologize. There was incoming signal there on my phone there. Sorry. And so, but so this singularity of human health, giving the opportunity for scaling, I see as this new era for the soil health mission and the soil health global efforts. And I think the human health piece of the herbicide and pesticide story is obviously starting to penetrate the news on almost a daily basis. Now you're seeing something about Roundup and cancer and lawsuits and efforts in Hawaii, everywhere else. Like there's just so many signs that the toxicity of the planet has reached this fever point that even politicians are having to shift their position on their stance. The EPA, we testified a couple weeks ago with Moms Across America and a couple other groups with the EPA with their open, they had an open session, a public open session in their review of reapproving Roundup and glyphosate for agricultural use. They have now approved that again, so they closed their public session September 5th and are back in action, approving that for another 9 to 13 years. So, the only groups that are really not bowing to this increasing pressure are the very groups that we would probably hope that would be the very most, the very front line of defense. But it's really showing, I think, an important thing. I'm actually really grateful to the current administration on one level, in that it's proven to us in spades that grassroots is the only way that we're going to save the planet. There's not a government on the planet that's proactive enough and is unselfish enough to make the difficult, decisions and difficult paradigm shift necessary to keep humans on this planet. We have this extraordinary expiration date cruising towards us. We're now 60 to 70 years from extinction on the human health side. We're about 60 harvests away from the end of agricultural capacity on the planet from the farmer's perspective, from farm science perspective. And amazingly, you may have seen articles even in the last few weeks saying that we may have as little as 6 years left of the bees and pollinators at the rate that we're losing them. And so if that's true, then obviously the extinction rate for humanity is going to take some paradigm leaps forward. We're not going to have 60 years. We're going to have much less than that. So that's incredible. It's incredible. For every morning I wake up, I wake up with a sense of, well, we haven't died yet, and we're still on purpose, and so we're here.
We're still here.
What are we going to do with the day, And so I feel like one of my hospice patients. Hospice was my third subspecialty that I got after I left UVA, and I've got some very close friends dying this week from various aggressive cancers and horrible conditions that really didn't even exist a few decades ago.
Yeah.
And watching these friends of mine die and watching family members suffering with Alzheimer's and beyond, it's heartrending, and a sense of, this is our last days, and so what are we going to do with those? And then this constant optimism under that surface of, we could change everything and stay a lot longer.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of our decision point right now. We can rise to a high level of consciousness as we die. I've seen innumerable hospice patients just blow me away with their expansion of consciousness, their expansion of their sense of spirituality and their spiritual peace and awareness in their last days. And if that's what we do, that's well done too. I think that's a race well done if the human species will wake up and be conscious for our last chapters. We die. I can handle that.
Yeah.
But I also have the sense of, when I look at human biology, I know we've never scratched the surface of our potential. We've never lived to our full biologic capacity. If we've never even lived to the full biologic capacity, which is something I can see under a microscope, what's the chances we've lived to our first full spiritual capacity, which is so much more difficult to wrap our fragile minds and limited perspectives around? I just don't think we're scratching the surface of potential. And so I think my mission with all of the companies that I run, I've got 12 companies now running, then I've got the nonprofit, and every one of these companies, every person that's working for me in these spaces knows that we have this one shot at totally changing these industries of energy, ecology, healthcare, biotech. We have to change every one of those industries yesterday, and we got to do it really in a completely new fashion. And so my discipline is make sure we blow up our current paradigm every day. Where can we push harder? Where can we push the envelope further to imagine something completely different for our education system, for our information technology systems, for our social media environments, for our farming and agricultural systems, for healthcare systems, for consumer product industry, for the plastics industry, for the yoga industry. We can talk about it in more detail, but I think the yoga industry is one of the worst things that's happened to the oceans in the history of apparel. And so we tend to just take the best things of the world, like yoga, for example, and turn them into toxic events for the planet. And so
with all the like plastic yoga pants.
Yeah, exactly. Suddenly you've got hundreds of thousands and millions of consumers around the world that feel the need for owning 7 to 10 pairs of stretchy pants that they've never had need for, 7 to 10 pairs of stretchy bra-like strappy things that they don't even understand. There's just like this consumer behavior around it, and the fact that we put microplastics in all of that microplastic ends up in the bloodstream of those women. It then ends up the formaldehyde and all the crap that's in a yoga mat gets absorbed through the sweating skin as you work out on your yoga mat. And so I just am dumbfounded every day about how we can so far miss the mark on nature's intention for us, God's intention for us, universe's intention for symmetry, for cycles of life, for understanding cycles of raw materials, carbon cycles, water cycles, soil cycles. We just are divorced from all of it on so many levels. And so we don't even blink when there's Athleta is a multi-billion-dollar company, Lululemon, a multi-billion-dollar company. It's just bizarre.
How do you, sometimes I find it hard deciding how to spend my time, knowing what's at stake. Like I'm in touch with so many scientists and farmers, and I know what's at stake for humanity. And then I see the potential of where we can get with grassroots action and where every human can inspire the next. And there's so much potential and so much at stake that sometimes in a given day, I feel like I run the race and I don't win. And it's like, was I supposed to answer my email or go to a meeting or love my child, or like, sure, you have to do all of them, but like, how do you spend time? And I wonder how you choose your priorities in a given day.
The shortest answer to that is I've decided to hug everybody. And so when I walk into one of my companies, I spend the first half hour running around hugging 100 of my employees to make sure everybody's gotten a hug and make sure that I'm communicating my appreciation of just being alive with them today. And then when I go speak, I hug everybody that listens to me. When I go to clinic, I hug every patient. When I got to hang out in New York with my daughter's school there this weekend and just hug the hell out of her and loving on her. And my son, he's got his girlfriend's family in from Germany right now. I'm just hugging on them. Like, in the end, I think that if you're hugging everybody that you know how to touch, you're not going to feel like you're wasting your time. And so it's just, remember that our society has trained us out of vulnerability and out of nurture. And so put vulnerability and nurture back into the front line of everything you do, and you'll be spending your time well doing all of the above. You'll have a good business meeting if you hugged everybody on the way in and on the way out. You'll have a fruitful experience with your children in the morning if you hug them and kiss them coming out of bed and hug them on the way to school. And the answer, I think, is ultimately that.
Yeah. Another advisor of ours, you probably know Charles Eisenstein. He's written a really beautiful book on climate. And we're actually going to do a webinar with him in 2 months. And he posits that love is the way through all of these. Like, we're going to figure out climate change. We're going to figure out human health. We're going to figure out how to stay on this planet by love, and extending not just like love for our family, but for the birds and the rivers and like for everything. And that really resonates for me.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think I would put one more caveat on that word love, is that we're scratching the surface again. I don't think we've ever done it well. I don't think we've ever done it completely. I think we have fits and spurts of effective love in our lives. Having a couple kids and watching them grow up into adults, that's been a crazy experience that I still don't fully wrap my head around, but I can say that that's probably the closest I've come to effective love. But I also, anybody who's ever been a parent knows it's the most humbling journey you can take, and you realize the limitations of your capacity to love unconditionally. All of these things are real. So that's where I don't want to let the pressure off of humanity right now. If we're just going to say, well, love's going to get us through, my point is not the way we fucking loved before, because we're not doing it. Like, people, love yourself as you'd love your neighbor, love your neighbor as you'd love yourself. We're not loving ourselves right now. And that's why we're doing to ourselves what we do. We are addicted to stuff. We are addicted to unhealthy behaviors in our life. We're addicted to unhealthy thought processes about ourselves. We get into vicious insecurity loops in our heads. We're not loving ourselves effectively. And so, yes, I agree with Charles that love will be the solution for everything, but it's going to have to be a different type of love. And so we have to push the boundaries there. We can't be complacent being like, oh yeah, we're going to love each other through this. If the love that we have for each other tomorrow looks anything like it did yesterday, we're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates for me. Whew. What are you most hopeful about right now? What are you seeing when you visit farms?
Right now, I'm most excited for drinking some matcha latte in a few minutes with coconut milk in it. Like, in some ways, like, I think that's where I'm at right now. I can't look at the big picture right now and be super excited and optimistic. And so I don't think we're supposed to necessarily. I don't think the universe, God, whatever is at hand above us, whatever higher intelligence we're a part of, I don't think its expectation or our expectation should be that we can see the pathway to this optimistic, bright future. Mm-hmm. I think I've come to the realization that personally, I have a limited umfeld, that human perspective or umfeld. Actually, if anybody hasn't heard of umfeld, you got to look up like some of the TED Talks on umfeld. It's such a brilliant way of realizing how ridiculously limited our human perspective is. But that's UMVELT, I believe, in the German there. German word for kind of worldview or perspective. That's the result of our sensory processing and how our eyes, ears, nose, and mouths kind of experience the world around us, and how we so far miss the reality around us for that limited umfeld. But so with that understanding my own limited umfeld, when I say, what am I hopeful for? I have to remember, really, what's the difference between being an angel and being human? And if you're not comfortable with the word angel, what's the difference between being an energy field out in the universe and being a rock or a human? What happens when an electromagnetic field chooses to be particle and not wave? In that moment, that light energy can become a particle and become solid. In that effervescent quantum physics moment, What's the difference? What's the difference between a quantum particle and a quantum wave? The difference is right now. The difference is a wave doesn't sense right now. A wave is propagating eternally. The particle is only here right this second, and it's very real for that moment. It's the only palpable thing at that moment. And so this is really a situation where, fascinatingly, I think we have a situation where to be fully in our potential, that steaming cup of matcha with coconut milk that captures my attention, watching the steam rise off of that with the sun coming through a window, coming through the steam of that cup, and being in my body where I can feel my face and I can feel my toes and I can feel the breath passing in and out of my lungs. And I can, if I stop and be quiet for a moment, I can feel the pulse of my bloodstream through my body. That's the most spiritual thing we can do, is be fully now and in the particle state. If we're looking towards some optimistic, vague future, we're not right here, right now. We're going to miss the opportunity to fully appreciate what it means to be in the particle state, to be human, to be alive right this second in physical form. Because why would have we chosen this? Like, why, if you think about a soul or an angel or whatever, force you want to think about, that was the organization of energy, sense of self, sense of identity, sense of purpose that existed before it jumped into your body. That soul, I believe, in the journeys that I've taken with my patients, when they die and then we manage to resuscitate them, when I hear their stories from the other side, it's clear that as soon as you let go of this body, you have a perspective that goes through the galaxies, through the universe, through space and time. Relativity is an experience, not a theory. Relativity and quantum time, space bending, all of that is right there at your fingertips the second you let go of this physical body. Come out of particle state, you're in wave form, you're eternal. Why would a soul want to jump into a body that's going to start to die in its frailty nearly the same moment that it jumps into the existence? What would be the rationale to a universe full of intelligent, energetic souls? What would be the rationale to jumping into a frail body if not for the experience of being in the particle state? When we're in the particle state, we get to experience now. And I think the angels sit around us in a state of just, I don't think they can have an emotion as devious as envy or jealousy, but there must be some sort of awe. I think it's a state of awe that an angel would look at you right now and be like, that person is being able to bend down right now and kiss the forehead of their baby. Look at the magic in that moment. I wish I could be a part of that particle experience, that solid, real experience of lips touching the forehead of a child, to smell the skin of a baby, to then turn around and see the crash of a wave on a beach, to experience that sound of thunder rolling across a countryside, to feel rain in your face when you're running down a lane or across a field, to feel what it is when a dog jumps up into your arms and licks you all over the face. These are the things I'm optimistic for, is that we are in particle state. We are real. We are solid in this moment, and we're solid in this moment together with 7 billion other people. It's freaking amazing that 7 billion people showed up right now.
Yeah. Well, we got to get off our phones and get into our bodies, huh?
Very good. That's it.
What else do you want to share before we take some questions?
I'm always at risk of talking too much. I want to hear you guys talk.
Okay, tell me what you've been seeing on farms. You've been visiting a lot of farms and farmers.
You see the whole gamut. You see a lot of desperate depression. You see a lot of hopelessness, and you see a lot of extreme ingenuity. You see a lot of extreme tenacity. You see a lot of hope against all hope. you see the willingness of people to do something different happening now as their farms are collapsing. They're about to lose these farms. They have a new willingness to think differently and hear differently and be more open-minded.
Yeah.
And so they're a microcosm of the whole human condition, that in our desperate state, whether we're farmers, consumers, school teachers, nurses, whatever, we're in the midst of the collapse. The farmers are definitely at the front lines of the collapse. I think I've been impressed with the fact that many of them are starting to, if not having long come to the same conclusions around the dangers of chemical farming that the rest of us are starting to realize. I think that they are very aware of the health risks at the subconscious level. And so when I show up and I give a couple hour presentation on the exact mechanism by which Roundup or some of these other chemicals are destroying their family's health, they're done. They get it. They don't even have any questions. When I go present to a bunch of doctors, they get all up in their head. They'll bitch and moan. They'll be in denial. They'll do all kinds of things. But the farmers don't. The farmers are like, shit, I think they're right. I think this is it. This is what I kind of, the women are all up in it. Like the women on these farms are so ahead of the curve. And I think women farmers are really the hope for the future, really. If we can get more women into farming, the industry will change very, very rapidly, because these women have been telling their husbands they want to go organic. They want to get these chemicals out of the household. These women are tired of taking these drenched coveralls covered with chemicals and throwing them in the washing machine every night. The whole house stinks like these chemicals, and so you've got dicamba and 2,4-D and atrazine and nicotinamides and Roundup all in one washing machine that's now volatilizing into the air, and it's just a nuclear bomb, and these women know it, and they're begging for a different direction. And the male mentality tends to be, this is the only way we can do it, and I'm going to lose the farm if I don't do it this way. And so when you open up a different path, the women are all in immediately. The men, then it takes 3 to 5 years to change the mind of a farmer typically, and I would say that's a male farmer. I think you can change the mind of a woman in a few minutes, and I think that that's just again a microcosm of where we are as a human species. Is we have to come to terms with the fact that we built a strictly male archetype society starting thousands of years ago, and it is killing the planet. The male archetype is literally killing the planet. To be clear, every human, male or female, has a male archetype and a feminine archetype within them. The male archetype is goal-oriented and driven. The female archetype is process-oriented and nurturing. I have both of those sides within me. I think I'm slowly trying to get myself out of my male archetype in the way that I run my companies. I'm trying to become feminine and archetype in the way I run have a relationship or engage with employees or investors or whatever it is. And that's where we're pushing towards, is if we don't wake up and create a feminine archetype across the board, we're gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been interesting for me evolving into a place of leadership. I find over and over again, I'm expected to act more male.
Yeah.
That's been an interesting process over the years to decide where that fits and where it doesn't, and where it's.
Please blow that up. I would ask you to please, for the sake of humanity, blow up the male archetype. And talk to the people that are trying to fit you into that. Talk to them about that. Like, look, we can be a goal-oriented group or organization or wherever you feel like you're being pushed into a male archetype, and say, just have a frank conversation. Do we want to be profitable or make more money in the next 3 months? Or do we want to create a process that's literally going to guide humanity into the future? And if it's a process, then we need to take it from a feminine archetype standpoint, and we need to keep a loose hand on the short-term goals and all of that.
For sure. Yeah, one of the best pieces that we adopted culturally as an organization in the beginning was this understanding that inner work means outer work. And so over the years, we've had this deep commitment to developing the people on our team and developing the relationships and the vulnerability on our team. And sometimes when I look back over the years, I'm like, yeah, we've done some amazing work with farmers, work building awareness, like curriculum, there's all this work out in the world. And I look at our team and how we've all developed as humans. And in some ways that's just as beautiful or even more important. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
That's
And
a
it's
great
so
perspective.
it's like, oh, I don't want to go to that meeting. I don't want to go to that retreat. I really have to take 3 hours off emails. It's like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Because we're going to
Yeah.
work through this.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
So Zach, we're getting tons of questions. Let's move there.
Good.
So there's like a Q&A. So we have 5 in the Q&A, but then we also have some in the chat. So let's start in the chat and then move to Q&A. We got, this topic can be overwhelming. Yes.
Check. I'm feeling you. I feel you.
And the next one is, I'm wondering if you're familiar with GM bacteria that will be released in the next year. I heard of it from Jeffrey Smith of IRT at Soil Not Oil. Apparently there's an executive order allowing it marketed as fertilizer.
Yeah, in fact, there was headlines just this morning that the government has officially deregulated the GMO marketplace for agriculture, and so there's going to be no more regulatory oversight on genetic modification of crops. Is kind of the take home on that. Even more alarming, there's been a proposal to allow genetically modified crops to enter the organic certification
great
space. So yeah, just that's this morning. So yeah, we are in one of the most rapidly deregulatory administrations we've ever seen. The EPA that we testified for, the powers that have been stuck in there in the recent couple of years were belligerent, they were rude, they were demeaning, they were blockading any progress, and they flat out told us everything you just showed us, 96 scientific studies are irrelevant to us. You didn't show us anything that can be turned into law because you didn't fill out the right form. And so when we asked for the form, they said, well, we don't actually publish the form. And they said, is there actually a form? Well, no, but there's some examples in history of how it could be done. They're just like so belligerent and so roadblocky and so ridiculous. But at the same time, you have people in the EPA that were sitting in that room that have been there for decades trying to do the right thing. And they literally were like sending signals to our team, like, not now, don't say anymore, turn it off. And then they walked us out of the building and we're basically saying, look, this is just, you guys need to keep your heads down right now. Come back in 2 years if we have a different administrative environment, we'll try again. So I can't imagine the frustration and the dismal existence of well-meaning people in the EPA right now that are being crushed by this, literal presidential mandate to deregulate everything and to wide open all, opportunities for the chemical and big ag industries to do more untested, unscientifically, proven stuff into the environment that can never be pulled back, So yes, there are bacteria that have been GMO'd and are going to be put into the environment. I know somebody mentioned that so far this conversation could be intense, and if you want to start going into the GMO chemistry, it's going to get a lot more intense pretty quickly here. But I don't want to spend the rest of the hour on this. I want to get to the other questions, I guess, but so I'm not going to freak you out about GMOs right now, I guess.
I think I actually saw there was a follow-up to that question. It says, what are a couple small steps that we can do? And to me, I've really made the biggest effort I can to take control of the food that I eat. And so I know all my local farmers. I talk to them about how they're growing food. I support them. I come out when they have farm dinners. I go to their markets. I pay a little extra to buy their produce, their meats, their cheeses. So for me, it's like one of the small steps is just really taking control of what you're purchasing and supporting the farmers around you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that's exactly where it begins is be a part of a new consumer industry that's local at the micro economy level. And then when you're participating in the larger economy, I think that it's about really pushing legislative change on labeling. Like, I think that's the only place that we have a glimmer of hope is if we can label as well as they do in Europe. Remember, that's our companies. It's Kellogg, it's General Mills. They're labeling correctly for Europe, and all we have to do is mandate the same labeling laws that Europe demands of these companies to take place here in the United States. They're already printing those labels. There is no extra cost to them, as they like to argue. And so labeling, I think, is the best way for us to impact the macro economy. And then selfishly, I would say support, Farmers Footprint and Kiss the Ground, because at Farmers Footprint, we're working on really massive shift. What we're doing is, at the grassroots level, we're creating new microeconomy platforms in the IT world to help connect consumers easier to those farmers and things like that. So that's in development. We've got non-toxic neighborhoods rolling out here, which is the toolkit for getting your municipalities and school systems to ban Roundup in public places, soccer fields, golf courses, things like this. We've got, golf courses are still exempt, it turns out, but soccer fields, playing fields, school fields, Department of Transportation, school cityscapes, those kinds of things. So that toolkit you'll find on our website within the next couple of weeks. We've got so that's kind of at the city level. At the governor level, we're working on a scalable format for the new state farm bill that Pennsylvania broke the mold on. And we're going to create a template for all the other governors to roll out state farm bills to usurp the power that's been in the federal farm bill that's been so corrupting farm behavior for the last 40 years. So we're tackling it on that level. And then on the federal level, I'm tackling as much as I can. And we just mentioned the EPA effort, but I'm not going to let up. I'm speaking at Al Gore's Climate Underground in 2 weeks to speak to lawmakers there. So I'm trying to tackle it through Farmers Footprint on the whole verticalized, kind of influencer level. And the teams that we're putting around these projects are world-class. Kiss the Ground has been incredibly influential at the consumer level for training up soil advocates around the country. The soil advocacy program that you guys have, I think, is really hopeful because you're creating all of these nodes of information. Even if those people don't go out to like train people how to, they still can't help themselves but to communicate at the water coolers and in the grocery store aisles and everything else. And so you're creating these agents of change to create that grassroots swell. So I think
we also
in the end,
our farmer scholarship program. So we have 20 farmers in the program, and that's our main fundraising goal is to train 5,000 farmers through that program in the next 5 years.
Amazing.
We got to move on, but I wanted to share this real quick. You know how you're like never famous in your own hometown? Like your own hometown is like the one place you can't advocate as much. Yeah. So I had an experience where my parents' neighbors took soil advocate training randomly. I grew up in Shepherdtown, West Virginia. I live in LA. And they contacted their other neighbors and said, we want to do a Kiss the Ground project. And my godparents, who have known me since I was born, were like, that's Lauren's organization. You're like, you realize
that's awesome.
Live behind you.
That's amazing.
So
that's a great moment. Vindication.
Project.
Yeah, well, you're not alone there. My mom never tracks very closely on what I'm. Well, she tries to keep up actually, but about a year ago, I was on a Dave Asprey's podcast, and she happened to see it. Or maybe it was 2 years ago, but she happened to see that one, and she called up and she said, "Zach, I just saw you on this guy, Dave Asprey. Yeah, Dave Asprey. And I just want to call you. I'm so impressed that you're starting to talk to the people that are actually doing things."
Thanks, Mom.
I was like, fist pump. I'm talking to the people that actually do things now. So
All right. Okay. Let's see how many of these questions we can get through. In my immediate circle, the most polarized discussions around climate change are about eating meat or not eating meat. I'm a healthy soil and regenerative ag advocate. Do you have any advice about talking about animals in our food systems?
I'm sorry, for some reason it broke up like twice as you were reading that on my side. It might have been my connection, but can you repeat
Oh,
that?
yeah. So the question is around how do we talk about animals in our food systems? Because this
Oh,
vegan animal debate is so polarized right now.
got it. Yep. Yeah, it's a good question. You know, so I definitely teach a plant-based diet in my clinics and all of that, but my companies are working very hard with large ag to change the health of the protein industry that's working in everything from beef down to the poultry industries are so toxic for the planet right now, and the humanitarian crisis that we have going on in our protein industry is just horrific. And so I was just at Polyface Farms 2 weekends ago. Teaching a group of 60 health practitioners there the importance of getting all of their patients to change to a more of a plant-based diet, and when they consume meat to consider the impact on the environment and on animal welfare. So I see, the need to move away from a massive protein industry. It's not good for human health. We eat about 200% too much protein for our bodies to handle, and that shortens our lifespan. It causes kidney failure, diabetes, and tons of other things, including cancer. So it's not good for us to eat as much protein as we are. It's horrific for us to be eating protein that's raised in fight or flight panic state, because the genetics of that panicked animal base influences the DNA response, your genetic response to that food. And so it can put you into a panic state when you just eat a piece of chicken. So there's lots of reasons we need to reform this aspect of kind of where we're at with everything from meat production all the way to what is the role of these animals. And if we historically look at the role of animals on farms, it was not to mass produce them or mass consume them. It was to work the soil with them. And so I think that's the big piece that we have to get back to with our farmers is we have hundreds of millions of acres of farmland that are untouched by a ruminant today. That is a disaster for planet Earth. And so we need to take our animals out of the feedlots and put them back on our agricultural land so that they can co-create diverse, soil microbial ecology and diversity with us, and they can build healthy farms with us. If we keep relegating cattle to one industry and crop production to another one, we'll kill the planet. And so we definitely need to clean up the protein production industry with the beef, pork, poultry, etc. But we also have to reintegrate these siloed specialties of crop production and meat production.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Doesn't it make sense to go back a bit, 50 to 100 years, to a time when we could reclaim a semblance of order, tweak the momentum, and then move forward? For example, acceptance of herbal remedies, home-prepared nutritious meals, rather than synthetic pharmaceuticals and processed foods.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that if we don't engage in systems thinking in all these areas, we're going to die. And it really is literally in all these areas. We cannot just do ecology. It's not enough change for us to save the species. We have to do health, energy, ecology, education, IT, technology, communications, everything. And so what I'm constantly preaching out there, like this past weekend, I was lecturing in Nantucket and at the Nantucket Project, which was the highest caliber audience I've ever been in front of in regard to just societal impact. I was there with the CEO of Intel Smart Cities, who's literally rolling out 5G Internet of Things. He and his wife were amazing people, wonderful Indian family, beautiful life perspective, warm, loving. And as soon as I started to in private kind of roll out my concerns about the 5G network and its impact on human biology, he was like, absolutely. I can't believe that, we're not being asked to engage the medical community to prove this out, but we don't even know how to ask those questions. Like I'm a technologist. Like I don't even have a clue how I would test if it's but I'm nervous for my children, and I can see the health impacts that society is having on my children right now. So he's like wide open. And I think that's something important for people to know, is that people who are working for Intel and Monsanto and all these companies, they're just human beings they take hugs from me just like anybody else does. They wrap up in my arms. They give that hug back. They love their kids. Like there's not evil on the planet. There's miscommunication, and there's siloed subspecialties. And I really believe that, if our president had gotten more hugs, he would be a different person as well, And so I think that we have miscommunication, we have fear, we have societal training of isolation, we have loneliness, we have insecurities. These are the things that breed the destructive systems that we've created. And so I guess it comes back to our previous conversation about love is going to get us through everything. Yes, it will, as long as we love differently. And I don't see this country loving itself right now. I see this country is currently hating itself into complete dysfunction. We hate the other party. We hate our politicians. We hate this or that. Like, the visceral quality of reaction that I see out there at the Nantucket Project was a good example. It was a largely, they had a hand raising, which I was kind of amazed by. At one point, they're like, raise your hand if you're a Democrat, raise your hand if you're a moderate, raise your hand if you're a Republican, raise your hand if you're a libertarian. So I was pretty impressed that they called people out on that. But the audience was, 90% raised their hands for Democrat, or a smattering of Republicans, a smattering of libertarians. And when you look at that audience, I can see just as much hatred and viscerality that I see in a 30-second Trump tweet in that audience towards him. And so we just have to remember that if we see disgusting human behavior, it must be a reflection of our greater whole. Our president was elected because he represents us best. He does. I think people think, well, how did that election happen? Because he literally represents the human mindset the best in our country right now. Our country look at the Democratic Party and what happened last election. I have an employee and a couple of friends that were at the Democratic National Convention where Bernie was lined up against Hillary, and were literally beat. They were physically beat by other Democrats, and the police had to get them out of there because Hillary's group was throwing chairs at them, like violent behavior. And so I don't even care about the Republicans at that point. What the hell is going on within our parties? How is there this visceral anger and hatred within our parties? And so I think that is because we are at a tipping point of human capacity. Right now, everybody is barely hanging on. They're exhausted. They feel like they can barely keep up with their day. Their emails, their social media stuff, their to-do list with the school board and the PTA and the volunteerism and 17 soccer events, and everything is pulling everybody to a breaking point. And the emotions are showing. We are emotionally breaking as much as we are physically and biologically and spiritually breaking right now. The golden lining there is that we know that's exactly what has triggered every other enlightenment moment in human history. We take paradigm leaps forward when we reach breaking points of society.
Yep.
Our country is going to collapse utterly in the next 10 to 15 years. We are going to see massive loss of life. We're going to see massive financial losses. We are going to see massive catastrophe in the United States, period. Mic drop, done. That is going to happen no matter if we're going to figure this stuff out and survive as a human species or not. Our country is a house of cards, has been for 40 plus years. The lies are getting deeper. The subterfuge and distraction of the media is getting more and more desperate. We are collapsing. We're doing it financially. We're doing it through very screwed up legal structures. We're in deeper debt than any other nation in the world. We are really at the brink, and we're spending $3.5 trillion a year on disease management. That will grow to $5.5 trillion years by 2023. We are going to go bankrupt as a nation. I don't see any way around that. So what is the plan? let's bankrupt our nation. Let's see that happen, and let's love each other through that. I know many people who've gone through bankruptcy personally, and they say on the other side of that it was the most important thing that ever happened to them because it helped them really reprioritize their lives, get solid financial processes in place, and rebuild a life. That's what we have to do as a nation. So I will accept the bankruptcy, and we will put ourselves back together. And I want to be a part of that because I think that what I've learned from nature is that she already has the template for society. And so I'm making some big plays on one of my companies, which is an IT platform, to level the playing field for social and infrastructure construction. How are we going to build a new society? And so I don't know how that's going to look, a new society, but I have learned from the bacteria and fungi how we lay a foundation for that society. And so I'm on a pipe dream effort right now with a brilliant group of people from around the world trying to lay the foundation for that new society. And it's got a lot to do with communication. It has a lot to do with what we call money. We have a corrupt money system dating back to Babylon. We need a monetary system that cannot be commoditized. We need it to be impossible to make money off of money. Money can only be a transaction of value. We need human relationship and human co-creative interaction to be the currency of the future. And we think we have cracked the code on the mathematical algorithms on how to make that currency work. So now we're building, banking and other things around that so that we have an infrastructure to roll out an international non-fiat currency. That'll be not money, but currency. It has to stay in motion to work. And so that means it has to be invested in human relationship and activities to build wealth. And it can't sit on its own making wealth. And so that's the big play that I'm making right now. I'm pouring, some of my companies think maybe too much resources into that pipe dream. But the reason that is because I think I've got about 10 years before the United States collapses its economy. And so I want to make sure that by that time, we've got a few billion users around the world on a non-fiat currency that we can jump into and not have a hiccup in the safety of your children, your provision for their families. When the dollar collapses, I want to make sure we have a solid non-fiat alternative.
Thank you, Zach.
I don't know if it's going to work.
Might work. We're definitely not going to be able to get through all these questions. So what I'd like to propose is that in the next 5 minutes, you answer this question of how can we help, which is like, how can people who are listening help? And then I will get you the rest of these questions and maybe we can answer them over email to everyone who participated today.
You're already doing it. You guys are all here. That's how you help. Stay engaged, stay listening, and stay thoughtful. Stay part of the action team. You guys who have taken minutes out of your morning to join this call are proving yourselves to be the front of that tip of the spear here. And so we appreciate who you are and what you're doing already. I would say, please give more hugs in a day. Hug, 10 to 15 people a day at a minimum. I would say, make sure that you're reinventing yourself every day. Let go of the stories that you hold on to. So when you introduce yourself to somebody, you tell a story. You're telling that story to yourself more than you are to that other person. Your story is limiting you. Think about letting go of everything that you think you are right now and become who you're capable of being in that surrender moment. Say, universe, use me to my highest potential, to my highest vibration. I am willing to let go of any previous, mentality or belief system or mindset to become the most powerful version of myself. So go after that.
Zach, how do you take care of your microbiome?
Outside as much as possible in as many different environments. And I'm pretty spoiled because I get to travel around the world and speak to thousands of people every week. And so I get to, in every hug I get, I'm getting microbiome. And so a 15 to 30 second hug is enough to start to swap genetic information, microRNA, as well as microbiome. So hug each other, hold on to each other, and get into as many outside environments as you can. So from the beaches in Nantucket to where I am right now, and I have to look outside for a second and see where I am right now. It's kind of lame. So San Diego, and then LA this afternoon, and just keep churning away. The more places I go, the more I know I can get outside and breathe my biome for a few minutes So that's a little bit of a snapshot. Huge fan of fermented foods, and so try to get in some wild fermented foods from different sectors of the country and world every day. So love the traditional Greek ferments, the Japanese ferments, the Korean ferments. All of these have different microbiome history to them. Sourdough in San Francisco. These things literally have decades, if not hundreds, if not thousands of years of genomic intelligence in them. And so get into those fermented foods wherever you are. And if you're always in the same environment, then reach out to the world through those fermented foods.
Yeah. Just like in nature, diversity breeds health, huh?
That's the entire solution. I think that's the answer for our political structures, our financial structures, our health structures, education. Diversity is the answer to every one of those.
Last thing is we're going to give, I think, a discount to Restore for all of our members.
Very cool.
This month. Do you want to explain what that is real quick?
I'll first explain that when it comes to you, it's not going to say Restore on it anymore. It's going to say Ion Biome. So we just had a massive brand shift. And so Ion Biome, Intelligence in Nature, Biome is the overarching brand. We'll be sending out Ion Biome Gut Health. Some of you may receive Restore too. Restore is still being circulated as well, but you'll get one of the two versions of it. It is the same product, just in a different wrapping. The product is a communication network made by bacteria and fungi. It's the carbon molecules that are made by each species of bacteria and fungi uniquely. And so one species of Pseudomonas makes a small family of 10 or 15 of these molecules. Different species of bacillus or whatever, we make another 10 or 15 versions of these carbon molecules. And when you put these all in a network where you've got billions of species cooperating and making this almost infinite number of carbon snowflakes, these various shapes of carbon molecules, you end up with what looks like a liquid circuit board at the biochemistry level, and it traffics information very quickly in millionths of a second. And so you can see the propagation of a message from one cell to the next within a millionth of a second. So the repair mechanisms within the human body, which are inherent to our machinery, speed up because they have more information and exchange information quicker. And so we're harnessing the microbial communication network from about 60 million years ago, right before the last great extinction on the planet. We had the deepest layers of humus and topsoils in the world known in history at that time. So we're extracting from that hyper-intelligence. I find it fascinating because when you take a sip of Restore Ion Biome, you're literally having an experience that no human has ever had, because we've only been around 200,000 years and the soil had already degraded by then. And so you're literally going back to a non-human era of intelligence and biology. And I think that's why we've seen such radical things happen to human beings on this product. It's because you're literally putting human biology back in touch with a deeper nature that we've never experienced before.
Awesome. Going through all the chat stuff, shout out to Morgantown, West Virginia.
Hey, that's where my great-grandparents were from.
Yeah, when Zach and I first met, I was like, oh, you're from Virginia. I'm from West Virginia. Somebody's 51st birthday. He said this is the best birthday gift. And thanks, Zach. It's so great getting to know you over the years, and you continue to inspire and keep us on the path. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on, Lauren. Thanks for the 42 participants there and all of you who listen to the recording later. Thanks for all the Q&A that we didn't get to. All of your questions are brilliant, and we'll look for opportunities to engage you at a later date. Best of health to all of you.
Yeah, and this is recorded, so we'll send it out to everyone. Thanks, Zach. Enjoy your matcha latte.
That's right. Take care, all.
I'm going to go give a hug.
Get those hugs in.
Bye.